Bit of an introduction already. I was born and raised in Levelland, Texas. So it's one word. It could be two, but they put them together. We do oil and cotton up there. I graduated high school in '89 and moved to Austin. So I'm a Longhorn. After completing my training there, I came to Houston. And I entered my career in Houston as a projectionist for the medical school class. And after listening to a number of lectures, I was just like, well, I can probably do this. So I just kind of followed these guys into clinic and started doing what they were doing. And here I am today. Now, I had to stay within the Baylor system because evidently, if you're not really enrolled in medical school, they'll only accept you within your local training institution. So I've done my residency, fellowship, and stuck around for my attending career all here at Baylor. It's been a nice place to grow up. I'm an informatician. So when I was doing my fellowship, Larry Jefferson was my section head at the time. He said, "Kurt, you do computers. You need to do something with computers." So I said, all right, and found some people that did some computer stuff, and I hooked on with them and didn't know exactly what I was doing at very first, but I moved forward and got to where I am today. After I got my PhD in informatics, I essentially became a nerd. Now, some of you in here may think that I'm a geek or spaz at times. That's okay, but I see myself as more nerd than geek or spaz. I'm also a husband and a father. My wife is actually doing the videography today, and my kids are here just serendipitously because it was too cold to go to school today or something like that. And I would like to thank you all for being here. It was very kind of you to show up and brave all of this cold weather that we've been having. Now, since we are streaming to YouTube, I want this to be a little bit of an interactive experience. You can participate if you want, but really I'm not asking for this audience's participation because I kind of know why you're here. You're here because you want to get out of work. For the rest of the people that are watching by YouTube, I don't know how many there are or how many there will be. I would like those guys to tell me why they're here. Hint, they're not supposed to be here for CME unless they're on one of our telemedicine sites. So we'll see how many people actually are watching from telemedicine. We may have some people that are just kind of curious. They saw the blog that we posted yesterday. May have a professional interest. I have some people across the nation that do similar stuff to me, and I told them that we were going to be doing this and asked them to drop by and check us out. And like I said before, we're all here because it's better than working. There's also an opportunity to text your comments and questions. This is, again, more for the YouTube audience than it is for us, but if somebody decides that they want to tweet or text me their questions rather than raise your hand and ask me, feel free to do so. All right. Hey, somebody's online. That's cool. We've got some people. All right. So now we're going to kind of kick off the talk, and I can't really just jump in and say, here's what informatics and decision support is. I need to set up the talk a little bit with the concepts that kind of motivate why it is that I'm here talking to you today. I'm going to talk about data to knowledge and the transition between. We'll talk about ignorance to awareness and the transition between. We're going to talk about some cognitive dysfunctions, and believe me, there's a lot of them. And then we'll talk a little bit about big data and real data. I had to include big data in my talk because everybody's saying it these days, and I want to be just like everybody else and talk about big data. After we talk about that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the clinical medicine and kind of the clinical reason that we're doing this, the problems that we're facing, and some of the solutions that are on the horizon and under development right now. So with that, let's go ahead and launch into the first part of the talk. Who in here, raise your hands if you've seen these words associated together before? Okay, so I'm not preaching to an ignorant crowd here. We've got a lot of people that have seen this. Does anybody want to give me a definition of the transition? What's the difference between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom? Anyone? I'll kind of give you a quick and dirty functional definition here. So 92, that's a symbol. That symbol is different than 82 or 96. Okay, so that in and of itself is data, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? Okay, it's 92, that's great. If I told you it was 92 Fahrenheit, now you're starting to have some understanding about what that means. If I tell you that it's in a fish, you interpret that differently than if I tell you if that's in a human. If I tell you that that's in a human that's in the emergency room naked in the middle of January, you're going to interpret that different than if I tell you that that human's getting ready to undergo cardiac bypass is on the table under active cooling. Okay? In that transition there, we've gone from raw data of 92 down to knowledge, which is knowing that you've got a patient on the table that's at 92 and you have a target about where you want them to be. Wisdom is when you can take that knowledge and you can apply it to new context. So if somebody were to come to you today and say, we need your help doing deep space travel and suspended animation, and you say, well, you know, maybe hypothermia is the way to do that. That would be where the wisdom piece of that would come in. We tend to operate in the knowledge and wisdom domains in the jobs that we do. So the message here is that data is useless, knowledge is power, and it's really the context around the information that you're receiving that is the key to the difference between those things. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about now is the transition from ignorance to awareness. So who in here knows what color underwear I'm wearing? And please, you know, if you do know, don't share that. But hopefully none of you know what color underwear I'm wearing right now. You're ignorant of that fact, and you're probably just fine with that. Who in here knows where the teddy bear is? Okay, not everybody, okay? So some of you were blind to the fact that I brought my teddy bear with me to work today. I needed a little bit of a security blanket, so thank you for bringing that, honey. Okay, the rest of you that did raise your hands were aware that the bear was there, okay? So when you're aware of something, you can operate on that. If you're ignorant or blind about something, there's no way for you to interact with that because you're not aware of it. So awareness is the key here. This is a little trick that I want to show you here. This is a video, okay? It's going to have a little bit of flashing in it. That's just to throw you off and distract you. But your job is to find the change, okay? And when you see the change, just simply raise your hand. Okay, do we have a bunch of dysfunctional hands in the audience? Did anybody see the change? We've got one in the back, two in the back. Have y'all seen this before? All right, what was the change?
The spikes.
Say that again?
The black lines.
The black lines changed? Nope. The background changed, okay. So I'm going to show you this video again, and I'm going to go between the first frame and the last frame and just flash the differences, okay? This should be a little bit more obvious to you. Okay, so when you see it back to back, it's pretty obvious. The color changed from yellow to red, and then the background got a little bit darker, right? But in the meantime, when you were watching it in real time, it wasn't quite so obvious, was it? This happens in medicine. This happens a lot. In the ICU, our patients change constantly, and they change slowly over time. When they change quick, we can catch that. Monitors can catch that. But as healthcare providers, sometimes we miss those subtle changes. So the point here is that we are often ignorant and blind of our own ignorance and blindness. And that's not saying that you're bad people or dumb people or anything like that. It's just the fact that you're human and you can't actually know everything all the time. I'm sorry, but you can't. Okay, cognitive dysfunction. Okay, this is how we know things. Okay, this is where we need to be in order to work, right? We've got to be aware of it and we've got to know it. It starts with perception. So you've got to see that there's some kind of color change that's taking place on the screen right there. You have to attend to that change. You have to actually take time to recognize it and pay attention to it. Then you have to go into your memory and say, okay, how does this relate to the other things I know? This gives me the context that's going to allow me to start making some informed decisions based on the knowledge that I've gained. You've got to think about what the right thing to do. You've got to decide to do it, and then you've got to do it. All of that is kind of your cognitive processes. And in that, there's about 140 types of cognitive errors. Okay, that's a lot. I showed you one example. That was the change blindness with the cuttlefish there. Just because you see something, though, and are aware of something, that doesn't mean that you're interpreting it correctly. Who's seen this picture before? Okay, a lot of you have seen this picture. Okay, so there may be some folks out there that haven't seen this picture. And what I want to point out here is that this picture can be perceived in two ways. One is that this is a young woman who's showing you her profile and has a feather sticking out of her cap, and you can kind of see her neckline there. And she's got this big, pretty, hair thing hanging off the back, and she's wearing a nice fuzzy coat. The other way to look at that is that rather than being the profile of a chin, that this area right here is actually, if my mouse is working, the old lady's nose. My mouse isn't really working that well. Sorry about that. It's the old lady's nose, and then rather than this being a necklace that she's wearing, that's her mouth. So many of you already know that, so I won't belabor the point, but we're all seeing the same data. Some of you will interpret this picture differently than others, and that basically has to do with the context that you got. If you don't want to walk around and go on it, you can. All right, so the message here is that we don't always know what we think we know. All right? All right, now let's talk a little bit about then and now. Okay, so when Fernando was a little bitty boy, he went to the encyclopedia to learn things. Okay? My kids don't even know what an encyclopedia is. They hop on the internet and it's Wikipedia straight away. Textbooks. I've got a lot of textbooks in my shelves. Rarely do I actually break them out. When I want to know something, I go to Google, I type it in, and I find the information that I'm looking for. Okay? I'm actually learning to play the guitar right now. I could go enroll in some courses and learn how to play guitar professionally, but I don't really want to do that. I just want to hack around and have fun. I go to YouTube. Okay? Garage sales, if you're looking for something special that doesn't really get sold in the stores anymore, good luck finding it at a garage sale. These days, you go to eBay. Find whatever you want. Right? What do all of these things share in common? They're totally different, okay? Not totally different, but they're pretty different, okay? They're technology enabled. They're crowdsourced, okay? That means that the whole world came together to build this stuff, okay? Wikipedia didn't happen because Dr. Klein wrote Wikipedia, okay? It happened because literally hundreds of thousands of people have kind of got together and put their information into a single repository. And we use it. It's not perfect. There's a lot of bias on Wikipedia, but it's a great tool. These technologies are bigger, they're faster, they're richer. Okay, there's a richer experience there, and they're free. These are all disruptive paradigms. Okay, medicine is in need of a disruptive paradigm. That's part of why I'm here talking to you today. The message here: teams and technology equals awesome. Okay, it's just that simple. All right, big data, real data. Who knows what big data is? Anyone? I don't really know what big data is either. Really, my understanding of it, though, is that there is a lot of stuff that's out there that we can't all see at the same time. Nobody can put all of that together. Okay, we're either ignorant or blind or both about that. So we're going to turn that over to the computers, tell them to go find interesting things. This is population-based. It can't be done by an individual. It's a knowledge discovery problem that's computer-based. This is not really what I'm talking to you about today. What I'm talking to you about today is real data. And what I mean by real data is I've got a patient in front of me that we're collecting information on. It's my job to know what that data is. Okay, if I miss something in that, bad things can happen. And I want to minimize that possibility. So I need to see stuff. Excuse me. But how do I do that? So real data is actually too big for us to know, okay? Our fund of knowledge compared to 100 years ago, we've named a lot more diseases. We can subtype a lot more diseases. I specialize in critical care. I can run a ventilator and I can turn dopamine up and down. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Okay. There's some really smart people out there that know how to manage lung transplants or take a septic kid and give them the right antibiotics rather than the stuff that I put them on when they came in. We'll just shoot everything at it. Okay. There's a lot of diagnostic options. Before you had X-ray. Now you've got MRIs and PET scans. And how do you know what the right test to order for what you're looking is? I don't know. Let's call a radiologist and ask them. Therapeutic options. You used to have to go to the OR to have something done. Now you can go to the cath lab and have something done. So is it better to go to the OR? Is it better to go to the cath lab or do a percutaneous procedure? Hard to say. We're in a state of flux right now. How medicine has really addressed this to date is to specialize. Okay, so I'm an intensive care pediatrician. Dr. Mallory's a lung transplant pediatrician, and there's adult surgeons, there's OB-GYNs, there's people that know different things than we know. And then we've got teams. In the ICU, I've got a team of probably 30 or 40 people that help me provide care for the kid that I'm taking care of. We've got residents, APPs, pharmacists, nurses, respiratory therapists. Y'all know the drill. It's a lot of people that help us provide care to these children. They all know their domain very well, and I need them to share with me their knowledge so that we can do the right job. Okay, our job then is to acquire the right data, be aware of it at the right time, interpret it in the right way, make the right decision, and then execute the right action. And we've got to do that several hundred times a day. Okay? There are opportunities for messing this up at every step. Okay? And we don't pull this off perfectly. We wish we did, but we don't. We need some help. All right. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about things that are not really informatics. So we're going to take a small break and go back to the polls and ask people to go ahead and text again if you're late to the YouTube stream and didn't catch it before. While you're here, you can also tweet it to @poll. And there are your codes. I'll leave that up for just a second longer. By the way, I'm excited that some people are streaming, but we actually don't have all that many people. We've got maybe a dozen or something. Do you know how many, Kara? 11. I was close. Okay. All right. Questions and comments can go there. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of why I'm here today. And the story really is that I'm a pediatric intensivist. I take care of kids that need life support. Either they need a ventilator to help them breathe, or they need fluids and drugs to help them maintain a blood pressure so that their organs can survive. That's what I do. It's a high-risk environment. There's a lot of variables that are moving. I need a lot of people to help me out. Bad things happen in the PICU. It's a dangerous place to be if you don't need to be there. There's a lot of data. We have monitors on just about any part of your body we can find skin to put it. And we've got competing goals. So when somebody comes into me with a blood pressure that's not quite right, I've got to make the decision. Do I want to give this kid fluid and potentially make their lungs sick, or do I want to tolerate this soft blood pressure knowing that if I do that too long, I could actually injure their kidneys or cause some other harm? So there's some competing goals, and it's not always clear what the right answer is. In the ICU, abnormal is normal. If you're normal, you're out the ICU. We're gonna evict you. So the goal is to get normal, but while you're there, you're abnormal. I equate patients to rattlesnakes. Okay, most of the time they'll leave you alone, but if you cross them or if you don't respect them, they're going to bite you. And when I say bite, what I'm really talking about is cardiac arrest. I mean, this is probably the ultimate bite that you can get as somebody that's working in the ICU, is to have somebody up and have a cardiac arrest on you when you're not expecting it. Just to let you know kind of the burden of disease, there's about 16,000 cardiac arrests that happen every year in pediatric patients. Now, this is all comers. This is inpatient and outpatient. If you're lucky enough to be in the hospital when you have your arrest, you've got about a 40% chance of surviving. Okay? If you are out of the hospital when you have your cardiac arrest, it's less than 10%. Okay, so it's a pretty serious disease. The burden of this disease is bigger than my hometown, by the way. So, not that my hometown's that big, but that feels like a lot to me. So, how can we help identify these kids? Well, in medicine, many of you know, we've got scoring tools. We've got probably 150 or 200, maybe even more than that, scoring tools that we use to basically objectify how sick a kid is. Okay, so people can talk about PAWS scores, CRS scores, Pew scores, MELD scores, SOFA scores. There's a lot of different scores we can put on kids that mean different things. These scores are really good. And the scores are actually decision support tests. Since they're objective, they can kind of help us communicate in the same language. The problem is they can tell you a rattlesnake from a kitty cat, but they can't tell you which rattlesnake's getting ready to bite you. So these scores are good for telling whether somebody needs to be in a regular hospital bed or the intensive care unit. They're not good for telling you, oh, that kid in the intensive care unit's about to arrest. That's actually where we need to put some better decision support in. So I've done some research on cardiac arrest in my career. And what I'm showing here is a fairly complicated graph. It looks pretty and colorful and whatnot, and I hope that you think it is because I put a lot of work into it. But it actually shows a lot of data put together. And when you know what this graph means, it's easy to use. So red are the kids that had cardiac arrest and what they looked like an hour before they had their arrest. Okay? The y-axis, this is where it is on the up and down part of it, is their shock index. Okay, now not everybody in here knows what a shock index is. Well, it's a calculation. It's your heart rate over your systolic blood pressure. Normally, your blood pressures are here and your heart rate's somewhere in the middle. But when your heart rate is twice what your systolic blood pressure is, you're in a little bit of a risky situation. Okay, so as kids get near their cardiac arrest, their shock indexes go up. It's probably a little hard to see on the screen here, but another thing that you'll notice is that the line color changes from red to kind of blue. So their oxygen saturations actually are dropping at the same time that their shock index is going up. And then the size of those dots in there are actually getting smaller over time. So that's their blood pressure. I'm using kind of two variables on the same thing, but basically, you can see it coming when you look at it this way. The problem is that this is a population of kids. This is not a single individual that's doing this. Okay? When you look at those scoring tools like the CRS score and the PAWS and things like that, those are built with essentially logistic regression models. Okay? They've modeled this data to predict something. And when I used those types of tools to predict cardiac arrest using that 1 minute before the arrest happened, the tool did okay. This is the little, see, can I, my mouse smart enough to figure that out now? That's this lower line. This is an ROC curve. This basically tells you how good your tool is at discriminating between different classes of patients. So arrest versus non-arrest in this case. Ideally, the ROC curve is a box. Okay, the line goes straight up the left-hand side and straight across the top. And when you use the regular tools, you get an area under the curve of about 80%. When you use the time series and look at the trend data where they're getting worse over time, and you start using more sophisticated modeling techniques rather than using regression, use things like support vector machines or neural networks or some of these other nerdy things, you can boost your accuracy up to closer to the 99% and above. And people are like, wow, that's great. Why don't you go ahead and just, use that? Well, the problem is these things have to run every single minute in order to work, right? So even if you're 99% good, if you run it 1,440 times a day on an individual, you're still going to get several false alarms per patient per day. That's unacceptable. I only want an alarm that's going to tell me something real. So we still have work to do. All right, another thing that happens is that kids' waveforms change as they get closer to an arrest. Okay, I don't know, is that projecting okay? reasonable. So this is a single patient, okay? And what these waveforms mean is anybody's guess, but they're different, okay? They're clearly different from one block to the next, okay? And the fact that they're changing is important. Now, not everybody's just standing at a monitor all day looking for that change. We did that change blindness experiment with the cuttlefish before. This is how this stuff changes, okay? When things are like wide-spaced and slow and ugly, you can go to the bedside and look at it and say, that doesn't look right. But finding some of these other things are a little bit harder to do. So we need something to help us out with that. One of the things that I did was I put this into a video file and put some color mapping on it. And you can see kind of on the left-hand side right now that all of that red disappeared and things changed. Now, this is basically EKG waves in profile that are all stacked up against one another. And really what I want you to get from this is the point that when you put it into a video file like that, it's actually, you can see 12 hours worth of data all at once. That's useful, okay, or it can be useful. We're not routinely employing this right now. The bandwidth required to do this type of analysis is pretty high. I don't actually have that right now. So how do we find out that a cardiac arrest is coming? Well, the first thing you need to know is that not all arrests can be predicted, okay? We know when kids are going to arrest a lot of times because we see it coming, and there's just nothing we can do about it. They're sick, and we're trying our best, but we know that it's going to happen anyway. But there's other kids that bite us because we're not expecting it, and we're not paying the right kind of attention to it, okay? If it can be detected. I'm not saying that all of them are detectable even. But how do you do that? Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is get data that can help you decide that, right? And I just showed you the time course of cardiac arrest. And it turns out that really you need up-to-date data. You're talking about minutes here. You can't have data that's hours old. Not good enough. You need all relevant data. It makes a difference whether you're on 4 pressors or you're on room air eating pancakes as to whether you're at high risk or low risk of having a cardiac arrest. So any tool that's going to make that prediction needs to know that. And really, when it decides that an arrest is about to happen, that shouldn't be something that I have to pull out my calculator and start doing a bunch of scoring on. Because if I'm having to do 1,440 scores per patient per day, I'm wasting all my time doing calculations and not taking care of patients. So when something triggers, it needs to find me. I don't need to go looking for it. Those are for you engineers out there, kind of the design specs. So when y'all build it, come talk to me and we'll get it going. All right, so this is the decision support part of the talk here at Texas Children's. Okay, I'm going to show 3 examples. I'm sure there's more that are out there, but these are the 3 I know about and kind of most versed in. So I'm going to present them and show you each of their strengths and limitations. The first one is the clinical systems integration and enterprise data warehouse. Now, this is the Texas Children's behemoth. They call it the truck, okay? This is a very broad kind of system-wide integrated delivery system initiative. It's got, I think, 500, I'll show you stats on it here in a minute. It's got a lot of people, a lot of money, and really what they do is kind of the core foundation of decision support. They provide best practices, protocols. They do things that basically make it hard for you to order the wrong thing, knowing what it is that you're taking care of. So if you know that you've got a pneumonia or asthma, or you can kind of put somebody into that bucket, we've got an order set for you. It'll tell you the best way to take care of that patient, okay? This is the truck analogy. So when they say truck, what they really mean is that there's a lot of people on the teams that are help making all of these decisions, right? So when you say, Kurt, how do you treat pneumonia? I say, well, here's how I do it. But they actually need somebody to go into the evidence, look at the literature, find out what the outcomes are. They need somebody to go into our databases, see what kind of performance we're doing. Are we following that kind of evidence or not? People to build the evidence. There's a lot of moving pieces there. It's a really complicated deal. But that's how we take care of kids here at TCH. And the work product they put out is phenomenal. They use a lot of databases. Okay, I'm looking at Epic. That's our medical record, right? So I can look at Epic, but these guys are looking at financials, administrative. They're looking at archive data from way back in the past, as well as today's data. Okay. This is an example of kind of what they track and monitor. So I was involved with the asthma order set and part of the asthma pathway. And it turns out if you've got asthma, you probably don't need a chest x-ray every time you come to the hospital. So we started looking at how often we check x-rays on kids that are coming into the hospital. We changed our order sets, we provided education, and we tracked the performance over time. And over time, we were ordering fewer and fewer chest x-rays. Now, that's not saying chest x-rays shouldn't be ordered in any asthmatic, but, you know, let's find a nice healthy balance about what the right number is. We don't know that number yet, but that's what we're looking at. So in just terms of raw statistics, there's 6 care process teams that are in operations right now, and I wish I could remember them all, but I'm too nervous and forgot them already. There's 500 guideline participants that have taken place in this, so many of you in here have probably been part of this already at some point in time. They've had about $1 million, more than $1 million in infrastructure costs to kind of develop this, and one of their big shining successes is a best practice alert trigger, a BPA trigger for septic shock, which is pretty much what you see in the emergency room when a kid comes in. What this does is it goes in and it says, okay, I've got a kid in front of me. The nurse just entered some vital signs based on this kid's age, fever, weight, blood pressure, and heart rate. I'm going to make a decision whether he's high risk or low risk. There may be other variables in there. I may be misquoting that a little bit, so I apologize if that's slightly wrong, but that's the spirit of it. And if you're in the chart and you click on the best practice alert, it'll say, hey, have you considered the shock protocol? And say, sure, that sounds great. And then you resuscitate the kid, send them to the ICU, and our outcomes have actually improved quite a bit with the implementation of that. That protocol has saved children's lives. There's no doubt about it. Okay? From there, we're going to go ahead and move over to Sickbay. Now, I've got a friend that came from Virginia. His name's Craig Rusin. He works in the department of cardiology, or the section of cardiology. He is a dedicated, FTE towards his decision support piece. I brought him here to do decision support for CVICU for cardiology. His system focuses on new ways of analyzing data. So as a clinician, I can look at a heart rate monitor and say, okay, well, that is interesting. There's his heart rate. But he can actually go back into the historical log of the heart rate and do other types of analysis on the heart rate. He can look at beat-to-beat variability. He can correlate it with the respiratory rate. He can find phasic shifts and all kinds of stuff that I know nothing about because I'm not an engineer. His team is much smaller than this enterprise data warehouse that I just told you guys about. It's a technical team. It's comprised of engineers, mathematicians. He leads it, and then he's got doctors that work with him to kind of tell him what it is that they're looking to do. Okay, some of the doctors he works with are also engineers, but it's a neat setup they've got. They collaborate with Rice University. His user interface looks about like this. This is his Sickbay program, and it's not what we as clinicians look at all the time, but this is a much longer stretch of data that can be seen in trends over time. And they do mathematical analysis on this, and they come up with graphs like this. Now, this happens to be the correlation between the cardiorespiratory interactions in premature infants. And it turns out that as infants mature towards normal gestation, their cardiorespiratory interactions normalize and become more highly correlated. So they came up with the way to basically say, based on population statistics, above a threshold of about 0.2, it looks like you're probably safe to discharge. All right, so now I'm going to get to the Goldilocks and the Three Bears part of the talk. Okay, so the Enterprise Data Warehouse and the Clinical Systems Integration team is great. They've got a lot of data. They get everything from Epic. They've got all the financials and administratives. Okay, the problem is that their data is updated every night at midnight. I can't use that to predict cardiac arrest. I've got to have data that's brand new. So I would love to use that infrastructure to get my hands on $1 million piece of equipment and run with it. That'd be a lot of fun, but it doesn't have exactly what I need. By the same token, Sickbay, it's got the up-to-date data. He's got live streams coming off of all of our monitors, but he doesn't have quite the diversity of data that the Enterprise Data Warehouse has. Now, both of these things are in flux. Okay, both of them are kind of merging together towards a common data source, and over time, each will have what they're looking for. But in the meantime, I've got to keep working. So that's why I invented this InVigilance system. Okay, this is also a section-based initiative. It's based out of the pediatric ICU and the critical care section. I do this in my non-clinical time. So when I'm not in the ICU or PCU working, I'm in my computer, I'm in my office nerding around on my computers, okay? So my main focus is on automating all of the things that we do as clinicians and providing that to you in a much easier format to digest, okay? So to me, shock index is important. To Aisha, her renal function numbers are important. To Eric, it's also the shock index. There's people that I'm collaborating with that tell me what it is they're looking for, and I kind of find this data and give it back to them in ways that they can use. So the team is very small here. It's me and it's an end user. Okay, so we're pretty quick. We can turn out some pretty fast stuff. I've heard the analogy that as it relates to the truck, this is more like a Vespa. I don't even know that we're a Vespa, frankly. I think we might be more like a bicycle, but we seem to get the job done. All right. There's really three parts to the system that I'm going to show you. There's a data acquisition piece that is a little freaky, but I'm going to share it anyway. There's a processing module that once the data gets into the database, it does all of the main work. This is kind of the heart and the meat and bones of the operation. And then there's the output. And I'll show you the output, or some examples of it anyway. And just to reiterate, this is not a product. This is not, anything commercial. This is just a name I've given something that can be done. Anyone can do this. Okay, so you people on YouTube that may be collaborators, I would suggest that y'all look into that. What it is a mishmash of a whole bunch of different toys, okay, technologies. So Epic is our electronic medical record. I'm going to go ahead and give a special tip of the hat to a program called AutoHotkey. This is essentially a scripting program that does the heavy lifting for me. It allows me to be a robot. It does what I would do in my absence. And then all of the other technologies that you see up there are just different pieces of the puzzle that make this whole system work. So what I'm going to do now is show you an example of the data acquisition module. And basically this is how I get, this isn't real-time data, it's near-time data. Okay, it takes about 15 minutes to get all the data out of the unit before it loops back and starts it over again. So some data is pretty fresh, but some of it's as stale as about 15, 20 minutes old. What it does is it basically gets into Epic. It'll go to the ICU. It's basically looking for various graphic icons on the screen to let it know where it is. When it sees that, it executes a series of either mouse movements and clicks or keystrokes. And it starts capturing data out of parts of the chart that I'm interested in. And there's probably 10 or 15 parts of the chart that I'm interested in. I'm interested in your demographics. I'm interested in your vital signs. I'm interested in your ventilator settings, intake and output, the drips you're on, the meds you've received, the labs you've had performed. There's a lot of different types of information that I'm getting out of Epic in order to drive some of this decision support that we're doing. And this video is getting close to being done, but basically I just showed you data collection for one patient. After it's done with that one patient, it'll loop to the next patient, and after it's gone through the unit, it goes back up to the top and does it all again. Once that data gets out, it comes out in kind of a text-based format. Okay, it doesn't come out into database format. So I basically have to use text parsing and say, well, if there's a space at the beginning of the line and then the next character looks like a date, then here's how we're going to treat that. And after it goes through all of that logic, it moves that data into a database format. With that, I can do anything I want with it. So the processing modules basically will take a query, says go find me all the heart rates and blood pressures in the unit, and we'll calculate a bunch of shock indexes. Okay, it'll perform those calculations and any statistics I ask it to perform, and then it generates some kind of an output. Okay, this is either going to be a score, or it'll be some other piece of information that somebody's interested in. And then it generates physical output by way of either a web page. I can send a text message. I can send a page to a clinician. We actually are paging our fellows when shock indexes exceed 2 in the ICU. And I can do other things with this, like we participate in the VPS. This is a benchmark of how well our unit does compared to all the other units in the nation. So it's a national benchmarking tool. Well, rather than having our nurses spend all of their time and energy going and getting the raw data out of Epic, I just do that for them. All right, here's some of the output from it. So this happens to be a kid that came into the ICU. When he first came in, he was on a lot of medicines to keep his heart rate or his heart beating strong and forcefully. So his inotrope score, this is the inotrope score here, started out pretty high. It was in the red zone. But over time, we were able to wean him off of his pressors, so he was getting better. This is an oxygenation index profile. So we intubated this kid. We started collecting some gases, started looking at the vent settings. You can see his lungs got kind of sick there for a little while and went up into the red. They didn't go super high, but they were red for a while. But then he started getting better, and we probably extubated him shortly after. This is a kid that came into the ICU and needed very quick resuscitation. You can see that we escalated our pressors very quickly and got, kind of to the ceiling on the plot there. That's not really the profile that you want to see in the ICU. Now, we know this kid's sick when we're working with them, but to be able to kind of go back and look at that and say, are we doing the right thing for this kid or not? We're actually using this now for our people that are on ECMO call to screen and say, when they see a pattern like that, they'll call up the guy in the unit and say, hey, tell me about so-and-so. Are they somebody that is going to be considered for ECMO or not? And if they are, then we can mobilize our team early and kind of be ready to go with that, rather than at 3 in the morning, somebody says, we should use ECMO. Let's call in the whole team. And nobody's ever heard of it before. So this is a little bit of an anticipatory guidance for the unit here. You're probably going to see this graph again next week because ICE is going to be talking, but this is a new metric that we're coming up with for kidney function. So it's not only what your creatinine is or how much urine output that you've got, but in the ICU specifically, we give you a lot of fluids because fluids keep your blood pressure up, and we want to preserve your kidney function. But a consequence of that is you get fluid overloaded, and if too much fluid overload can be a bad thing. So we actually monitor that, and in addition to that, we track how many nephrotoxic medications you're on. So we combine all of that into a single score that Aisha will give you all kinds of data about next week. Another thing that you can do once you've got all of this information in the database is you can basically have a bird's eye view of how the ICU looks right now. And this is pretty early in its development, so this isn't, actually this part is live, but it's not where I want it to be yet. This basically shows you which bed spaces are the hot bed spaces. So whoever's in pod 3 right now, which is at the bottom, I'm not going to use the mouse, I'll just say it's the red stuff at the bottom. That's a busy pod right now. Okay, they're doing a lot of work. They're putting in a lot of orders. When the nurse manager comes on and is getting ready to make assignments for that night, she might want to put her more seasoned nurses in pod 3 tonight rather than put them all in pod 1 where there's not a whole lot of stuff going on. What's coming is when you see a particular bed space you're interested in, you'll be able to hover over it and get a little snapshot of what is it about that patient that's so sick. Is it their lungs, heart, kidneys? What is it that's making them so sick right now? That'll be able to give you a little bit of a bird's eye view of it. And then if you focus in on that, they'll basically be able to compare you to all of our historical controls. We've got thousands of patients in the database that we can go back and say, well, if your oxygenation index hit 25 and you're on the oscillator, How many people have been in that situation before? Not everybody gets to that level of illness. Does that impact your outcomes? And it'll be able to give you basically real-time analysis of how things are going. And more importantly to me, what I think the ultimate utility of that would be to show to a parent at some point in time. And, if everything's green, say, look, things are green. But if they see this daily in and out and over, and 3 weeks ago things were green, and today everything's red, that might help them see the picture a little bit more than just somebody coming by and saying things are good or bad every day. Now, we do a better job of communicating than just saying good or bad, but you get the point. And this is just a video of 24 hours of activity in the ICU. So I don't know how many slides there were in there. There were probably about 70 or 80 different iterations that ran. I didn't really want to put that slide in there, but I did. All right. This is going to be an example of the VPS automation. So we participate in this benchmarking program, and we have to enter a lot of data in order to participate. It takes our nurses a lot of time to do this. A lot of this we've simplified. I basically go in the morning and I'll double click a button that says do it, and then I wait for a couple of minutes while it does it. And this is what it does. It queries all of the data, builds my tables, and then it goes into the VPS system and actually enters this stuff into the web-based forms and submits it. And in the time that it's taken me to show you that, that case has been submitted. All right. So that technology right there, compared to the old system where the nurses did this, it took about 15 minutes a case for the nurse to go into Epic, get all of the various pieces of information that they were looking for, put it down on a piece of paper, hopefully not making an error in that transcription process, and then going to the computer and hopefully not making another error as they put it into the database and submitted it. Took them about 15 minutes a case. I've knocked it down to about a minute a case, and they don't even have to touch it, and that's all my time. That's about $40,000 a year in labor offset that we're looking at in terms of how that's helped. All right, we're getting, man, I'm glad we're wrapping up here. We're getting close to the end. So now what? This is really kind of the big vision part of the talk. Okay, I've shown you kind of what's out there and what it can do, but where I want to tie all of this together is to say that cardiac arrest kills a lot of children, and a lot of that happens in the ICU. I'd like to stop that, okay? Or I'd like to at least minimize it to the extent that we can. I've got a lot of arrest data. That 12-hour window leading up to an arrest, I've got a lot of that information. And I'm going to pull out my tools, and I'm going to start trying to find ways to model this stuff, okay? But I'm not perfect. I'm ignorant. I'm blind in certain respects. But I know that there are a lot of people that are out there. I know some of the people that I collaborate with. There's probably people that I don't know that could help in this endeavor as well. And I know that if you put teams and technology together, you can do some pretty awesome stuff. So what I would say at the conclusion here is that I might be able to do something. If I use all of my academic collaborators, I'd say that we've got a better chance of doing something significant because we've got more people. If you turn this over to the world and you let the world do this, there's a good chance that you're going to find a lot of ways to help kids, okay? Not the least of which is going to be the cardiac arrest thing. The devil's in the details, though, right? I don't think Texas Children's is going to be very excited when I walk into their office and say, hey, I'd like to just go ahead and turn over all of our health data to the world. What do you think about that? They'll say, fired. But data can be anonymized, okay? There are ways that we can scrub the identifiers out of this and make it anonymous data and still get the information content out there for people to work with. In my opinion, that needs to happen. The question is how to do it and how to do it while preserving my job. So I'm open to suggestions, and to you YouTube viewers out there as well, I would challenge you, if you've got access to this kind of data, do the same thing. Start working on this. Beat me to the punch because I'm racing. In closing, decision support is what we need to help us see important things. Okay. There's multiple types of decision support. I've shown y'all several types here today. And we really do need help saving the lives of kids. We need everybody's help. Yours, mine as well. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. There are a number of you in this room. I tried putting names on the slides, and there were too many to actually put everybody's individual names. But you know who you are. If you've ever mentored me, helped me, or collaborated with me, I really appreciate this. I couldn't have done this without you. In particular, my section has been very supportive, and I thank you for that. I would also like to thank Kara Lyons over here. Kara is TCH's social media coordinator. She is the person that made this YouTube experience possible. Hopefully we didn't screw that up too bad. And if you're bored sometime and want to go catch it again on YouTube, you're welcome to do so. With that, I'd like to go ahead and see who's here, but before I show that on the big screen, I'm going to go ahead and just see if it's worth showing. All right, so nobody's here because they said that it beats working. So I know that this is a very biased and inaccurate poll. One person came in for CME, 3 people because they were curious, and 3 people because they have a professional interest. And there's one person that texted in, waiting for clinic to start later this morning. Love TCH and the experience of training there. So thank you for whoever wrote that. Okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close my talk out and open it up to you guys. Okay. Evidently my slide's not working anymore either. I've got to get back over to it. For questions in general.
Kurt, the traditional way that academic